Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's actually not just APM. This is troubleshooting with multiple products. So we'll talk about, let's see, I'll switch to my agenda. Using browser, right, you may notice that you're having a performance issue, first of all, on the front end. So if you notice that your browser page loads are slow, how can you combine browser data with APM? We'll talk about that. Then we just announced our new, one more before the new product. Browser and synthetics are both measuring front-end performance. They're great by themselves, but how can you really make the most of them by using them together? We'll talk about that. Then here's our new product announcement. Infrastructure announced yesterday. So maybe your server-side code is performing a little slowly, but it has nothing to do with your code. How can you connect your APM data with this new infrastructure product? And then finally, you can tie all of these together with New Relic Insights, because all of our products are feeding their raw data up into Insights with a query language and a dashboarding engine, and we'll talk about how you can use that. Now, training is a little tricky at a conference like this. It's hard for me to say anything in less than an hour. I did training sessions yesterday, and I found that I'd be about halfway through what I wanted to talk about, and I had 10 minutes left. So they've separated the training session into the presentation part, which is this one, and the hands-on workshop part, which is after lunch. You're not obligated to come back, but if you want a chance to practice doing what I'm going to talk about, we're going to do that after lunch. And we have a training account with applications that are having issues, and you can log in and actually practice troubleshooting. But for this part of the session, I'm just going to demonstrate the process. So this is sort of teaching you how to do it, and afterwards you get to practice. So let's dive in. That's it for slides. Now I'm going to actually be in live products. So first of all, let's see, which window do I want? Browser and APM. Oh, yeah. Sorry, let me see what I can do here. Is that better? That's a little small, so I'll zoom in a bit. How's that? OK. So this is data from our New Relic discussion forum, discuss.newrelic.com. And we are, of course, they say eat your own dog food, but that's kind of negative. So we say we drink our own champagne at New Relic. We use New Relic to monitor our applications and services. So this is the browser data for our discussion forum. And it's actually not doing poorly, but if you look at the times, our average page load time up here, can I zoom in? Is about 6.3 seconds on average. I clicked, I didn't want to click, I just wanted to zoom. There's my 6.3 second page view, and that's the average, but you can see some spikes here. This is 10.5 seconds is the top line, and I hit that peak once, and then over here I'm hitting about 8.5 seconds. So it could be faster. It's about what we expect it to be, but let's say that we had an issue and we wanted to try to improve the performance of our discussion forum. So one of the great features of browser, yesterday if you attended my browser training, I talked about what the colors on this chart mean and how you can sort of drill down and say, well, if the blue part of that chart, the page rendering, is where most of the time is being spent, how can I dig into that and see exactly what's going on during the page rendering phase? And we talked about using this session trace feature, which shows you a timeline view of exactly what's going on during page rendering. So that's using just browser by itself. But what if these browser pages are relying on back-end services? And so the reason that the page load is taking a long time is not because of anything on the client side, but because it's waiting on back-end code. So to see that, you can click over onto the Page Views menu on the left-hand side to see which pages on the site are taking the most time. This is a discussion forum, so viewing a topic, the topic view is probably the page that people visit most often. And you can see that we roll up. I don't know. Again, I'll try to zoom in here without clicking on it. There we go. We roll up the URL, right? So the URL of a topic in our discussion forum is discuss.newrelic.com/t for topic / the title of the topic / the message ID. So we have generalized that, right? It's the same code on the back end, so you don't necessarily need to know that topic foo is taking X amount of time and topic how do I get a job at New Relic is taking a certain amount of time. We just kind of roll those up and say, in general, the view a topic page is taking 68.6% of the total time over this 3-day period that I'm looking at. And if I then select that page, that URL pattern, then we'll give you the data on the right-hand side will change to show you the specific page load and throughput information just for that type of URL. This is our staging environment, so it's a little bit sluggish. Okay, so the topic pages, well, no, they're still peaking around 10 seconds. That chart is just scaled higher, so it doesn't look as bad. You can see the page load timing. The throughput is averaging about 2 to 3 page views per minute. But then here's the interesting part. If this page is relying on back-end code, we will show you on the Apm Transactions tab which back-end transactions are used to render that page. And so this is Discourse is the forum software. It has a topics controller, and we're calling the show method. And the average response time there, it's not too bad, 77.6 milliseconds. But we can click right here and jump over to Apm directly to that transaction. So now we're in Apm. We're looking at the forum production application. We've zoomed into the Transactions tab, and we have selected that specific method, the show method of the topics controller. We've sorted by most time consuming. So because this is getting called so frequently, it's using 60% of the total time over the last 3 days. And if I hover over this, I should get a pop-up. Is it going to pop up for me? Oh, maybe I need to close the little selection first. There we go. Here's my pop-up. So the pop-up tells you, even though over 3 days it's used 60% of the total time, the average response time is 77.6 milliseconds, but the throughput, see the bottom number there, is 46 requests per minute. So there's a lot of confusion around how can the most time-consuming be different from the slowest transaction. If I sort by slowest, I get a different transaction at the top. This Zendesk controller create ticket transaction has an average response time of over 2 seconds. That's a lot slower. Why is it not the most time-consuming? Anybody have a theory? Because it's not getting called very often. It takes almost 2.1 seconds per call, but we only call it, infrequently. Somebody wants to create a ticket. On the other hand, this one is pretty fast, about 78 milliseconds per call, but it's getting called 46 times per minute. People are viewing topics all the time. So the most time-consuming sort order is response time times throughput, and it helps you to really focus your attention on which transactions are impacting the end user. So just to recap, to use browser and Apm together, you can start by selecting the Page Views menu in browser to see which pages are taking the most time. Drill down on an individual URL pattern that you're interested in, whichever type of URL people are visiting most often. And then if that page is relying on Apm backend code, there's a tab called Apm Transactions. Here it is. That will allow you to jump over to Apm. On the other hand, if the page is making AJAX calls, there's an AJAX calls tab that says here are all the endpoints that page is calling in order to render itself. Now these AJAX calls are not ours. They're part of the Discourse application, so I can't jump over and actually troubleshoot that. But if the fact that this 4.46 second average response time is a problem, that's a little slow, I could contact whoever, the maintainer of that code, and say, hey, this AJAX endpoint that we're calling 46 times a minute has an average response time of 4 seconds. What can we do about that? So browser works well with Apm. It tells you which AJAX calls your pages are using. Okay, so that's the first example, browser with Apm. Next, what about browser with synthetics? I'm going to switch to a different one of our applications. Not forum, blog. There it is. And if you attended my browser and synthetics training yesterday, the next 5 minutes will be familiar to you. So this is data from our New Relic blog, blog.newrelic.com. It's even slower. An average response time of 9.1 seconds with some peaks here of over 14 seconds. And so yesterday we showed how you can, again, drill down and figure out exactly what's going on these pages that's taking so long. And one of the features that's very valuable there is session traces. So most of the data that you're looking at on these charts is aggregate or average data. When I point at a data point, I'm not going to go back because it's a little slow in staging, but I'll just describe it. If you point at a data point on a chart, a little window will pop up, a little box, and it says, this is the average response time of 1 minute, or 1 hour, or 30 minutes, right? Depending on the range on your chart, the x-axis. So we're taking all of the requests during a particular minute, let's say, averaging their response time, and that's the data point on the chart. But what if you want to drill down into an individual page load? You want to say, okay, well, so that's the average, but I want to see the detailed information for one call. Well, that's what session traces give you. And so here I've clicked the Session Traces tab, and I'm going to choose one URL. You can search in the search box and say, show me all of the session traces for this particular page. So there's a blog article called Popular Programming Languages 2016. Looks like Go. Spoiler alert, Go is the most popular programming language. So these are the detailed page load times for one URL. This is all the same blog post, but look at the range of times. The first one up there, Chrome 54 on Windows, took about 2.5 seconds to load. The next one down took 16.5. The next one below that, 18.5. So, and there's a 34 down here. So how slow is my site, or what is the actual load time? What is truth? Well, it turns out, as in presidential elections, truth is relative. They're all true. For this user, it took 2.5 seconds. For this user, it took 34 seconds. They're both on Windows. They're both on Chrome 54. So what do we do about that? Does that mean my site is slow? It's taking 34 seconds? Well, for that person, it did. But really, what we need is some way to remove the noise, remove the broad variable number of range of page load times. And that's how synthetics can be useful in tandem with browser. Browser is awesome because you're getting real user data from your actual end users. So you'll get the full range of browsers that they're using, the full range of geographic locations where those users are. Synthetics is much more limited. It's one browser on one operating system we have 14 locations out of the box. You can extend that with what we call private locations, but it's going to be a lot less broad range of data. But on the other hand, it's a lot more of a controlled environment. So let me go over to my synthetics data. I'm trying to remember which account it's in. It is in oh, it is in staging. OK, no, it's the same account. Except it's not finding any of my monitors. Why not? Sorry, one sec. I've got stuff scattered across all different accounts. I got to find where it is. No, that's not it. I should have it in staging, but my staging synthetics is not showing up. So we'll have to use our imagination a little bit. Let me use some other data. Oh, sorry, wrong click. OK, here we go. Let's do all right. So I'm trying to find the same page loaded multiple times. These time ranges are not quite as variable as the others. But if I look at this pet clinic owners number 5, here it took 0.45 seconds, 0.49 seconds. This one took 0.35. So these are clustered a lot closer together because this isn't real user data. This is all a script that's generating the data. But the idea is that if you're getting real user data in browser and you're running a synthetics monitor against your site, then you can come over to synthetics and look at your data. And actually, my synthetics data has a broader range of times than my RUM, my real user data. Here I'm monitoring from, it looks like 8 different locations around the world. And the one at the bottom there is Portland, Oregon, is generally the fastest, about 5 seconds. Now, this is not page loads, by the way. This script is doing simulating what a real user would do. So I'm not just hitting a single page. I'm actually saying, OK, a typical user of my pet clinic app might get a list of the veterinarians who work in the clinic, then search for the name of a pet owner. So I'm going to the owner's find page and searching for a last name. Then I'm going to the edit owner information page and updating the last name field. So I'm trying to simulate how a user would typically use my site. And to complete that entire task is taking about 5 seconds from Portland, and what do we have up top here? Singapore is the slowest. Looks like it's averaging around, I had it there for a second, about 18, 19 seconds or so from Singapore to do that whole script. So this is maybe not the best example because I'm looking at individual page loads in browser, but I'm actually visiting several pages in synthetics. But if I were to set up a simple browser monitor, this guy, instead of writing a script, I give it a URL, and this will load that URL in a real browser. And so I could compare the page load times that my real users are experiencing in the wild with their slow internet connections and their slow machines, possibly, with what I get in synthetics, which is a controlled environment. The only thing running on that machine is the browser. It's got a fast internet connection because we use cloud providers like AWS and Linode. And so it helps remove some of the noise. And then I could set up an alert in synthetics that says, all right, I want to monitor how my users are experiencing my site, but I don't need to get woken up in the middle of the night unless synthetics tells me that my site is really slow, that it's averaging more than 10 seconds per load, et cetera. Does that make sense? So you can use synthetics in tandem with browser to help sort of smooth the data and remove some of the variables that cause your page loads to be extremely slow and then the next one to be fast. So if synthetics tells you it's slow, then it's time to actually wake up your people and try to figure out the problem. OK? Does that make sense? So we looked at browser with APM, browser with synthetics. What about APM and infrastructure? Let's see. I'm going to preview what you'll do in the workshop after lunch, but I won't give away the answer because I want you to troubleshoot this and figure it out. But oh my, something's happening there. So this is APM data. My application was working fine. I was getting an average response time. It looks like around 100 milliseconds or so. And then all of a sudden, right around midnight, I have this huge response time spike. And then things go back to normal. So what could have caused that? Is it a problem with my code? Did somebody do a deploy? As Cameron from Airbnb showed, there's no deploy marker on this chart, so it doesn't look like anybody changed my code. Interestingly, my throughput went down during that slow period. So it's not like I got hit with a traffic spike at midnight either that caused my site to go crazy. It looks maybe like the code was having trouble running. It couldn't process the number of transactions that were coming in, and so it serviced fewer during that spike. Well, what you may not have seen so far at FutureStack is that if you scroll down on this overview chart, we have information about the servers that are hosting that application. So this app is being hosted on 3 different servers. These are AWS instances. This little thing that looks like a toaster indicates that the code is running in a container. So we're running it in Docker containers. And here's a little hint that might help you later. Notice that one of these has a much higher CPU percentage than the others, and a slightly higher memory percentage. So if I were going to start drilling down and looking for details, that might be where I would start. I did also want to point out, though, this little used feature, that little button that looks like a chart. If you have a lot of hosts, your app is running on lots of servers, you'll see them here in a table, and you can kind of eyeball it and say, oh, it looks like this number is higher than the others. But this little feature is kind of cool. If you click the chart icon, then instead of showing you a list of hosts, we will show you a list of charts of performance indicators. So here's the response time with one line for each host. Here's the throughput for each host. Here's the CPU usage and the memory usage for each host. So if you see something like this, where one of the lines is much higher for a particular metric than the others, then you know exactly which host or which container you want to focus your attention on. So that's a nice feature. This little breakout metric by host allows you to see them as individual lines. Now, the other feature that's nice then is these are links, these host names, and if I were to click on one of them, it will take me over to our new product, infrastructure. I'll zoom in a bit. And infrastructure then shows you, sorry? The hosts are, these are application servers. Yeah, so they're running Tomcat with a Java application running on them. They do serve web pages as well, right? So the user's browser hits the server runs some code to get some data, and then it does feed a page back to the browser. So they are web servers, but they're also running application code. Does that make sense? So here we are in infrastructure. All of my hosts are reporting up to infrastructure, and I may be interested only in a particular subset of those hosts. If I have lots of servers on my account, but I'm really looking at just that pet clinic application, I have a saved filter set called, I'm going to delete this one. Can I delete it? No, it's under settings. This one has no name, so I'm going to get rid of it. Come back, come back. There we go. So I have a filter set called New Relic Pet Clinic, and it lists the hosts that are running my Pet Clinic application. So I've now added a filter that says, show me just the hosts where the app name attribute is called New Relic Pet Clinic. And then I can, I'm not getting any data. Why not? Those are events. Oh, I was on the events tab. Sorry, not the compute tab. All right. So here are my metrics for all of my hosts. Then I can filter them and say, show me just the pet clinic hosts. OK, so that chart changes slightly. Here's our response time spike. You can see high CPU. And I'm going to stop there. For the lab, I'm going to have you go in here and drill down and try to figure out who logged into the host at midnight. It was me, but I used a different username. To cause this problem, and what did I do? What process was running on the server that caused my application to slow down? So I won't give away the answer. But that's basically the process, is starting from the overview dashboard of your application, where you notice that you've got an issue. You can then click on your servers down at the bottom to jump over to infrastructure, and then proceed to investigate and say, well, which servers are having the problem? What was going on? The events indicate changes that happened on the server, deployments or logins or what have you. And you can use the various metrics on these charts to figure out what occurred that caused high CPU or something that slowed down our application. Something else I'll talk about a little bit is we do have Docker support in infrastructure. I don't know if anyone has mentioned that. They may have talked about it in the Getting Started with Infrastructure talk over there. But if let's see. I could save a filter set, but instead I want to create a new filter. And when I create a new filter, I'm going to get a list of all of the tags that are associated with my account. We automatically pick up any tags that you've created in AWS, in Amazon. We've got pretty good Amazon integration out of the box. So these are EC2 instances, and all of those Amazon tags show up here. I could search. I am also using Docker. I'm trying to find my containers. Sorry, infrastructure is new, so I'm still trying to figure out where things are. I'm expecting to see something called container name here, but it's not reporting. So I'm either doing something wrong or there's a glitch here that I'm not expecting to see. But anyway, if I were able to figure this out, I could group by container name. And there's Docker. And see what's going on with my individual Docker containers. Here's Docker container. Joel, do you know how to find Docker in here? It worked the other day, but I'm not remembering where I found it. So I'll find it during the lunch break, and if you come back, I'll have it figured out by then. OK, so that's APM with infrastructure, and we're going to practice doing that during the workshop portion after lunch. You'll notice the spike in APM. You'll jump over to infrastructure and sort of do some sleuthing and figure out what I did to sabotage my own application. And then the last thing I want to talk about for the last few minutes is insights. All of this data is feeding up into New Relic Insights. And we have the Data Explorer, which allows you to sort of spelunk, and not Splunk the product, but spelunk, like going through caves, to see what the types of events are being reported to your application and the attributes associated with those events. So I don't know if you've attended any of our Insights training, but I'll quickly describe the event types. A page view occurs whenever a page loads in the end user's browser that's monitored by our browser application. A transaction occurs whenever APM monitors a back-end transaction executing, and it'll tell you which host it was running on and how long it took to complete and how much time was spent talking to the database, et cetera. If you enable SPA, single-page app support in browser, then you get two additional types of events, an AJAX request and a browser interaction request, which is what measures a route change in a single-page app. And then our infrastructure product is sending up these samples, compute samples, and infrastructure events, and network and process and storage samples. So all of these sample events are actually coming from infrastructure. When you run synthetics, every time one of your synthetics monitors runs, it generates a synthetic check event, and each resource that's requested as part of that run generates a synthetic request event. So the HTML page for your site is one request, and the JPEG of your logo is another request, and the JavaScript file is a third request. So all of those requests are recorded separately. So all of that raw data is here. How is that useful? What can you do with that? Well, let's say, for example, synthetics. You can set up synthetics to notify you if the monitor fails. So as I showed earlier on my pet clinic script, I'm simulating what a user would do, and I'm going through this flow of visiting this page and doing a search for a last name and visiting another page, et cetera. If that monitor fails at any point, you can set up synthetics to notify you using our alerts product. But many of our customers have said, well, I don't want to get notified if it fails from one location. Let's say it fails from Atlanta, but maybe Atlanta's having a network problem. So I really don't need to get notified unless it fails from 2 or more locations at the same time. If Atlanta and New York are having a problem, or if London and Sydney, Australia, if 2 or more, then I know it's really a problem on my end and not on the monitoring side. That's when I want you to wake me up. And until recently, until this week, you haven't been able to do that. There was a plug-in. It's kind of a hassle to get it set up. But now that we have NRQL alerting, NRQL alerting, you can write an insights query. So you could say, show me the unique count of location names from synthetics check events. And I'm going to put the name, where monitor name is New Relic Pet Clinic. So I'm looking at a single synthetics monitor named New Relic Pet Clinic. Get me the number of unique location names. And so monitor name is Pet Clinic. And result is failed. Since, I don't know if any have failed in the last hour. Let's see. I'm getting a red squiggle here. I just want to make sure that I use the right attribute. Location label, that's it. Okay. So yeah, still no failures in the last hour. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay. So if I widen my window a little bit, in the last 3 hours, I've failed from 8 locations. So for NRQL alerting, you need a query like this that returns a number. Here it's the number of locations from which my monitor has failed. In Insights, I might be interested in which locations those are. So I could say, let's facet or group these by location label. And it will show me each location and how many times it's failed. So I failed from all 8 of my locations that I'm monitoring one time within the last 3 hours. And then if I go back and remove the facet, just get the number back again, we have, this is what we had before there was NRQL alerting. You have the ability to specify thresholds over here on the right. So you could say, if it's 1 or more locations, I want you to turn it yellow on the dashboard. You sort of warn me that something might be amiss. And if it's 2 or more, now we've got a problem. Now we know that my site is really down, so I want to turn it red. So I could put this on a dashboard and say failures, let's say synthetic failures by location. And I'll create a dashboard here. Question? How am I defining it? Well, it's not me, it's synthetics. I wrote a script in synthetics that said, I want you to visit this page and click this link and go here. And if it fails at any point, like I click a link and I get a 500 error or it times out, then the script fails and synthetics tells me that it failed. So you can do this, right? You can say, all right, here's the number of locations that have failed, and I can put it on a dashboard, and that's fine. If you ever visit a New Relic office, you'll see dashboards on big screens up on the wall, and you can walk through the hallways and say, oh, we've got a red situation. But if you're a busy ops person, you don't have time to be looking at dashboards, you probably would like to get proactively notified if something like this happens. One of our product managers is fond of saying, if you're not alerting, you're not monitoring, right? Monitoring means you should get notified if something happens, not wait for a customer to call you or happen to notice it on a screen. So let's go over to alerts. And alert policies. And I currently have a policy called default that's monitoring some conditions. If my AppDex goes low or I have high CPU usage, I'll get notified. I'm going to add a new condition to my default policy. And this little box over here on the right is new. I can put a NRQL, an NRQL query, as the condition that will trigger a notification. So I'm going to say, OK, let's do a NRQL alert. Next, define thresholds. And here's where I actually put my query. There's a NRQL prompt up there with the word select. So I'm going to come back over to the one that I just wrote and copy it and paste it into my NRQL prompt. Now, you don't put a time frame on a NRQL query because you're going to do the time down here. Evaluate the query data from X number of minutes ago. So I'm going to remove the since 3 hours ago. But instead, I'll put the query in here. Give me the unique count of location labels where monitor name is New Relic Pet Clinic and result is failed. Let's evaluate the data from 5 minutes ago. And if it returns a value above 2, if I say for at least 5 minutes, then I would need to have 2 locations failing for 5 consecutive minutes. That may be what you want. That works best if you're running the synthetics check once per minute. So you're going to get 1 minute data coming in, and it'll say, all right, if it stays failed for 5 minutes, 5 samples, then I want you to let me know. But what we could do is say at least once in 5 minutes. So watch your synthetics monitors 5 minutes at a time, and if 2 or more of them fail at least one time within 5 minutes, then I want you to notify me, alert me, and I can add a warning threshold that says if one of them fails at least once in 5 minutes, the warning threshold does not actually trigger a notification, but it will turn your application status yellow. It'll say, well, this app is in a warning state, and if it keeps going in the way it's going, it's like a bad teenager, we're going to have a problem, and we'll notify you. Okay, and then I'm going to name this condition NURCL 2 or more failed synthetics. Give it a nice, meaningful name so that if we get an alert, that name helps us. Okay, and then I'm going to create that condition. All right, so now I've got this condition, 2 or more failed synthetics locations within 5 minutes should trigger an alert condition. On the Notification Channels tab, I'm like, here's where I want you to notify me. Send an email to the ops team at my company, post a message to the FutureStack16 Slack channel, and we've got a couple of other ways. We're going to push this information about the alert over to Insights so we could create a dashboard or do some further analytics. So now I think I need to make it fail. Let me kill one of my machines here. Actually, I don't even, well, I'll do it. That's the easy way to do it. I was going to say I could just kill the app, but then I have to VPN, so this will be easier. Okay, so I'm going to go over to one of these hosts that's running my app and just stop the instance. Okay, and while that's stopping, let me go over to synthetics and make sure that this thing is checking frequently. It's running every 5 minutes, but I'm going to crank it up to every minute so we get notified more quickly. It won't let me do it because I'm using over my allotment of synthetics checks. I'm disabling a couple of these just to get my number of monitors down below the threshold, so it'll let me run this more often. There we go. Still won't let me do it. Okay. So this should now be checking once per minute. It should notify me if it fails from 2 or more locations. Hopefully this works. Let's cross our fingers. While we wait, I'm going to do some more stuff over here in Insights. When you enable AWS integration in infrastructure, we automatically create several dashboards for you in Insights, which is kind of cool. So a lot of our customers have said, you know, Insights is cool, but I don't really know how to get started. I have to learn this query language and figure out how to put widgets on dashboards. So I turned on AWS integration on my account, and infrastructure automatically created this dashboard for me and all of those other ones that say AWS on the left-hand side. So I have 8 instances, 8 EC2 instances in the US West 2 region, but if I had multiple regions, this would tell me how many in each. Here's a list of, or a graph of the instance state. So you can see that one of them was terminated here this morning, and in fact, I just stopped one So the number of stops should increase from 1 to 2 in a moment. Here's a chart of my instance types. Here's an inventory of all of the various software and attributes that are associated with my instances. And then here's an event. This is a new type of visualization that just rolled out as part of infrastructure. You can actually visualize the events that are happening on your account. So here, for example, it tells me that this EC2 instance was just modified 5 minutes ago. Is that right? Well, that's 10 a.m. This was 2 hours ago. I modified an EC2 instance. All right, let's see if we have an alert. No? OK. Well, that's not going to happen. I had one earlier. So probably by the time we come back from lunch, it'll say, hey, by the way, your synthetics check has failed. All right, well, that was essentially what I had planned to cover, and it's about time for lunch. But I'll just see for the last couple of minutes if there are questions that you have. We talked about, if you notice the slowdown in browser, how you can jump from page data over to APM to see which back-end code is generating those pages to help troubleshoot if the problem is on the back end. We saw that you can use APM with infrastructure, and we're going to drill down more after lunch into that, so that if the reason your application is slowing down is because of something on the server, you can troubleshoot that. And then we talked about how all of that data is feeding up into Insights. So you can create dashboards to get notified, to view information that you care about, like how many locations are failing a synthetics check. And you can create alerts based on those NRQL queries to get proactively notified. Questions? He's got a microphone here. Here we go.
Thanks. So the part about APM to infrastructure is really good, because we need to know that, you know, if one of the servers is causing a problem on the application side. So is there a way to do like a stack trace from, let's say, you see one of the servers, you know, turning hot, for instance. You want to know like what application is this impacting, or what part of the application? Is there any way to make that connection?
Yeah, I can't give a simple answer to that question. Sort of is the answer. Infrastructure doesn't know anything about your code, right? So you're not going to see any kind of stack, call stack, or stack trace information on infrastructure. That's just data coming from the operating system. So infrastructure will tell you which processes are running, how much CPU and memory are being used on the server, which users logged in and changed things. On the APM side, let's see if I can find some.
But you can, from the APM side, find out which servers are being impacted.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I was hoping, is that if that connection coming from one, that information coming from one side, could it be rolled back to the other?
No. Yeah. So on APM, we've got your list of hosts, and you can see that a particular host is using higher CPU or memory than the others. But the actual code information, which transactions are affected, is here in APM. So I could see, for example, that my get owners transaction had a call that took 17.2 seconds. And then if I click that, it'll show me the call stack. Right? So all of the code level information is going to be on the APM side.
So let's say, you know, JVM was hot, I did a restart, I should see that number going down.
You should.
17%.
I actually had that happen. Let me go back previous 60 minutes here and go to the JVMs tab. And I can see that on this JVM, I maxed out my heap memory. And as a result, my garbage collection CPU went crazy, right? So again, this is all APM, but it is showing you some JVM stats. You could put this chart on a dashboard to keep an eye on it in Insights. We now have the ability to hover over any chart and say, add to an Insights dashboard. So it's not so much, this really doesn't have much to do with infrastructure. This is all within APM. If you care about your code and JVM is slow, which transactions are impacted, you're going to see all that within APM. The only thing you get by jumping over to infrastructure is to say, well, did something happen on the server to cause this? Does that make sense? OK. All right, well, it's lunchtime. That sound tells you that it's food truck time. So if you want to come back and practice troubleshooting with some actual demo applications, come back after lunch. Thanks very much.